was the first Stephen Lang Professor of Performing Arts, and I am also the director of the dance program here and the faculty advisor for off-campus study. So I wear a number of hats. I dance between them as best I can. At the other end of the table is the current Stephen Lang Professor of Performing Arts, Alan Kuharski, who is also the director of the theater program here. And between us are our very, very wonderful panelists, John Alston, Gayle Isa, Teya Sepinuk. Their bios, which are very impressive, are in your program, and I'm going to follow Joy's lead in that we will get to the meat of our discussion here. Funny thing for a vegetarian to say, but there you go. And hopefully have time for your questions and responses to the work of these people. I want to make just very, very brief comments, and they arise from the last panel. I was taking furious notes about the connections, right? People often say, so the arts and social change? What's that? And I would say that it is deeply embedded in my understanding. I see a lot of people nodding their heads, my understanding of what Swarthmore is about. It is certainly deeply embedded in the departments of, all of the departments that serve the arts communities on this campus. And I want to just pull out a few things that people said on the last panel that really highlight for me the way that the arts are a vehicle to help make change, okay? The first thing that I heard was it's about collaborative work. There is no art form in which we don't do collaborative work. 2, it's about a diversity of approaches. Yes, absolutely, right? We cannot do this on our own. We seek not to do it on our own. We seek to do it together and thereby be changed and make change. Next, it's about listening. Yep, it's about listening with your body, to your body, with your mind, from your spirit. It's about all of those things. And that is what we try to share with our students, speaking for those of us who are on the faculty here. And it is deeply what we learn from our students. So I want to thank my students and former students who are here for all the learning that I have the great opportunity to be engaged with each and every day. Finally, someone said, you have to see change is possible and that challenges are matched by assets. I believe that was you, Vincent. I want to say thank you for that. Swarthmore has taught all of us here that the arts are a very challenging place to try to claim a place for making change. And yet, they have such amazing assets that will bring us forward and bring us together, right? Whether we are talking about on campus, in Chester, Philadelphia, or across the world. Finally, this was the last comment. I think it was yours, Jeremy. I don't know where you are right now. Get into the system. Yes, these people can talk to us about the challenges of getting into a system, of creating a system for change. So it's about sustainability as well. And Lourdes said the resilience is really important, and I would say that absolutely. Right? The first no is not the one that you need to listen to. It's about how you turn that no into a maybe, and the next one into a I'll consider it, and the final one into all right, how can I help? Okay, I won't take any more time. Our first speaker is John Alston.
Good afternoon, everyone. I've been working in Chester, Pennsylvania, just about 3 miles down the road for the last 17 years. I began with 7 boys that year. And I had this fantasy that we would sing Bach cantatas and the world would be a better place. And that was so stupid. But I didn't know any better. I was in a professional boys chorus growing up in the North Boys Chorus, and we did a lot of classical music, and I just thought that was the greatest thing in the world, and classical music was the thing that got me here to Swarthmore College, and I'm very grateful for that. So I thought I would just replicate that in Swarthmore, and that it would all work out. And that was so naive, and even a bit of colonialism there, like we were going to ride in with Bach and save the whole world, and it was completely uninformed. The children have taught me a lot in 17 years. Now, we are not singing Bach yet, but this semester we are singing Vivaldi's Magnificat. So we have come a long, long way. And I also wish that I could tell you that singing is the thing that's going to make the world a better place and that everything will go away, but it's certainly not true. It will make some wounds go away, but those sorrows that we carry for the rest of our lives, hopefully we can transform that into something better. And mostly for our children, the things that happen in rehearsal and the way that they control the rehearsal and the kinds of things that they contribute to the vibrancy of the Chester Children's Chorus, that's what's important. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about for just 2 minutes. So about 5 years ago, I was driving a little girl home. There were a bunch in the back, and one girl, Jasmine, who's now a sophomore in high school, they were in the back arguing. Oh, that's my song. Oh, that's my song. No, that's my song. No, that's my song. And I said, what song are you talking about? They were talking about Vittoria's motet Ave Maria. So this beautiful little black girl, right, in the 4th grade talking about, that's my song, that's my song. But the thing about that moment is that she owned that little bit of Renaissance music for that minute, and it was a part of her. Like so many students that come here that have experienced Renaissance and other kinds of classical music, she will have that much in common. She will be participating that little bit in the culture of power. So what the Chester Children's Chorus, what we try to do always is explore the entire world through music. And I know that sounds corny, but that's what we do. So when she's talking about that's my song, and then it's like a throwback to 500 years ago singing in Latin, it was this spectacular moment. And they do it all the time. 3 years ago, I was very, very excited because I thought they're ready to sing the Hallelujah chorus. They're absolutely ready. So I brought it in. I was very, very excited. And we start rehearsing. And they sing it dutifully. And after a few minutes, somebody raises their hand and says, John, this is boring. All we do is say hallelujah over and over again. And I was so sad that day. I mean, I really was sad because, this is a real monument in Western music. I thought if they could own this, that will bring them one step closer, again, to many of the students that come to college here and attend the finest colleges and universities in the United States. So instead of forcing them to do it, I said, okay, all right, they're not ready for it. I took it away, and we brought it back 3 years later. This was now 3 summers ago that we learned it. And we have a summer camp, 6-week summer camp, and we rehearsed it every day. And they were so invigorated by the thing, and I said, when you sing this thing, I promise you the audience will stand up and give you a standing ovation. And so they sang it, and they really sang it. And again, it was beautiful. And we're not as big as we are now. I think there are only 40 children singing it at the time. And when you get to the final hallelujah, hallelujah, amen, the entire audience just stood up. And I looked right at the kids. I said, I told you so. I told you so. And so now they own a little bit more of the same stuff that the folks that are in charge of do, right? So eventually, they will know enough so that they will have the same kind of there will be enough cultural overlap so that they can begin to compete with children in more affluent school districts. I should tell you that Chester is a town of about 35,000, and the median income is just over $13,000 a year. Last year there were 25 murders. You have to imagine what Swarthmore would be like. Swarthmore, the town of Swarthmore, if there were 4 murders a year, how you'd feel. You'd leave, right? But these kids don't leave, they grow up and they thrive. And the miracle is that they get really, really good at stuff. The other thing that we do in the Chester Children's Chorus is try to make it as democratic as possible. Now, choruses and orchestras are not the typical vehicle for teaching democracy. Usually it's the guy in charge or the gal in charge, and then the kids do whatever they're supposed to do. But I always let them tell me when they don't like a song. All I ask is that they be able to articulate what it is that they don't like about it and that they do it gracefully. This is key. Because when I first meet some of these kids, this song is corny, this song is corny. Yes, it is, darling, but we're going to give it a shot anyway. So we have a ritual that if they don't like a particular piece of music, that they can actually rip it up and throw it at me during the rehearsal. And I don't just say this to entertain you, but what's important about that is that they're beginning to learn what it's like to be in charge. They're beginning to learn what it's like to tell the adult, the person that's in charge, whether it's the mayor or some other institution, they're beginning to say, we don't like this piece and we want to change it. They sometimes change the music that I write for them, and they will offer suggestions, and I'll almost always let them have it, whether or not it's an improvement or not, because they have to have practice as children being in charge, or else the only thing that will happen is that when they're adults, they will not know how to be in charge. The piece that I'll share for you now is live from last year. It's the Geographical Fugue. It's built on the following subject: Trinidad and the big Mississippi and the town Honolulu and the Lake Titicaca. The Popocatépetl is not in Canada, rather in Mexico. Watch how hard these kids, it's not a perfect performance, but watch how hard these children are concentrating when they're doing it. And they're reading the rhythms on the page. It took a whole semester to get this. And then watch the reaction afterwards. Because when they've conquered this piece and the audience rewards them with the applause, you even have one girl, you'd swear she's in church, she says, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And it's just a powerful, powerful experience. It is possible to transfer that sort of thing to school. And I will talk about this right after this performance. So this is the hardest thing we've ever done in public. Ready? It's about 3 minutes. a great night. So, so I'm thinking, and my friends and I are thinking, if we can do that on 2 days a week, what could happen if we had a school and we had children for 7 or 8 hours a day for 180 days a year? And so that was always a thought that drove the founding of a school in Chester. It's a public school. There are currently pre-K 3 students through 4th grade, 280 students. The Chester Fund, which Maurice and I lead, puts a second teacher in every classroom. We pay for the dance program, we pay for computer technology, we pay for full-time music, full-time dance, we pay for an extended day so that the 3rd and 4th graders are in school until 5:30 rather than 3:45, because we want the children to have a similar experience to the best private schools in the country, so that we can combine this kind of artistic rigor with academic excellence. It doesn't happen automatically, because if that were the case, then more musicians and more artists and more dancers would be out there making the world a greater place. You have to teach children the relationship between the kinds of disciplines and the kinds of achievements that you have in art with the rest of their lives. So I'll tell you about one little boy, and I'll close with this. 4th grade boy, very, very angry. For the first 2 years, he didn't even speak to me. The other day, I walked into an art class, and he's painting very, very carefully and quietly, and they're just beautiful brush strokes. And the art teacher points out, says, "This kid has so much patience." So I call him Little Picasso now. And for those moments when he's making art, he is peaceful, he is tranquil, he is concentrated, and he is confident. And in the course of the next 5 or 6 years, his teachers, and this is a deliberate effort, and this is why we believe so strongly in the arts, and the arts don't answer everything, but the arts will help this kid for sure. The teachers will deliberately teach this boy how to transfer all of these skills and experiences from his painting to his reading and to his math and to the way that he interacts with the rest of his children. And that's why we do what we do. And I'll close now with that thought, and hopefully we'll be able to talk a little later. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Gayle Isa, and I'm an alum from Swarthmore. I graduated about half my life ago, and have been in Pennsylvania for almost about that much time as well. I'm going to take from your talk the idea that I would love to be able to rip up pieces of paper and throw them at the authorities in order to make things change. Today I want to talk a little bit about my work with Asian Arts Initiative, which is a community-based art center here in Philadelphia in the Chinatown neighborhood. And my journey with Asian Arts Initiative actually began as a student at Swarthmore. I came from a background of growing up in Southern California and not having to really think about the fact that I was Asian American. It was something that I was able to take for granted given the demographics of the people and the communities that were around me. And coming to Swarthmore, and especially to Philadelphia at the time, was a very stark contrast. One where I felt very invisibilized and also very isolated. And so it became really important for me personally to find ways of reaching out and connecting with other Asian Americans and to building a sense of community. And that's something I feel fortunate I was able to do through a lot of campus organizing. Alan knows my feisty days of working with the Intercultural Center and with advocating for Asian American Studies classes and professors and student enrollment on campus. And I'm also very grateful that I had the opportunity to do a number of off-campus internships, one of which was with the Asian Arts Initiative, which was at that time an initiative of the Painted Bride Art Center, another important Philadelphia arts institution. And at the time, it was 1993. It was the wake of the LA uprisings after the Rodney King verdict in Los Angeles. And there was a group of African American artists who had actually approached the Painted Bride wanting to do a project where the African American community and the Asian American community could come together. And at the time, the Painted Bride responded by convening the handful of Asian American artists and activists who they knew. And those folks at the time said, you know, before we can have a dialogue with another racial group, we really need a place and a space to figure out our own cultural voice. And they challenged the Painted Bride to commit to doing not just a one-time project or one-time event, but to making an ongoing commitment to doing programs by and with the Asian American community. And so I was fortunate to start as an intern working on Philadelphia's first ever Asian American Arts Festival. So it was a multidisciplinary and multi-day festival that took place over a period of 2 weeks. One of Teya's projects was actually part of that festival. And since that time, you know, Asian Arts Initiative has continued to grow, and I'm happy to say that even though, you know, sort of the initial impulse was about how is it that, you know, the Asian American community can talk amongst ourselves and figure out our own cultural voice, through our work over the years, we've very much continued to be and are presently committed, you know, to being about dialogue among various communities within the Asian American community and between Asian American communities and other communities, including the African American community in particular, especially in our youth programs now. And so, sadly, that's still a very big need. I don't know how many of you are aware of the sort of national news that was made in December of 2009 when about 30 mostly recent Asian immigrant students were attacked in the course of a single day by fellow students at South Philadelphia High School. And the incident has been the focus of a U.S. Department of Justice investigation. It's been a touch point for a lot of media attention, and as well as for community organizing. And hopefully it will be able to be a catalyst for some of the change that's necessary in our public schools, and in the level of resources that's available to the urban school system as well. I was gonna just show a very short, I think probably 1 minute clip from a video that was actually created by some of the youth in our after school program at Asian Arts Initiative. Actually, this is a summer video, where they were documenting the residency of a guest artist, a visiting artist named Jeff Silkowski, a muralist and b-boy, former b-boy, self-taught street artist who then went to get his fine arts degree and has feet in both worlds. So this is just the section that they did about the Asian Arts Initiative. The video itself is longer, and I'm happy to share the longer version with anybody who's interested later. Actually, can you skip to chapter 7?
The Asian Arts Initiative was very influential to my artistic development because they really provided a community or a space for me to sort of just explore my artistic side, which prior to that, I don't think I had the confidence. I was just too scared.
I followed my friend to the building because I was bored after school, and then my whole just like career Asian Arts Initiative was born there. I love art. I get to do it here and learn more about it. Get immersed inside of art.
I could come here without worry of any type of problems. It's a really nice little place to go to. It gives some inspiration.
One day I was walking, coming home from school, and I ran into my friend Ellis, and forced me on the train with them, and he wouldn't let me get off. And then I came across the Asian Arts Initiative.
All the people that I met here have the same kind of personality, or very close.
I love the diversity, it makes me happy.
Everybody's here is so nice, and we just like we just connected. Like we just like one big family.
During this past summer, I've been here almost all day, every day, So I've been here more than I'm actually here at my house. It's just, I love this place.
Like very comfortable. Everybody's so kind.
The initiative was really provide a space for me to sort of feel good about, you know, wanting to be creative. So I think that was tremendous in terms of, you know, my growth and development as just, I think, a person in general, but definitely as an artist.
You know, stick with Asian art, always the best thing ever in my life.
The kids have inspired me a ton, just in terms of their passion for what they do and their talent and willingness to constantly learn and try and keep going.
So the other, yep. So I'm particularly proud of the video because it was students who were documenting sort of their peers' experience that summer. And I guess one of the other aspects of our work as an organization that I just wanted to highlight, and maybe we can come back to in the discussion if folks are interested, is that now Asian Arts Initiative has become a landowner. Just last summer, we were able to purchase, after being displaced actually by the expansion of the Pennsylvania Convention Center, we were able to purchase the building that we are now in, and are in the process of trying to develop actually a multi-tenant arts facility, which we envision housing a diversity of artists and other organizations and community groups, sharing space and also playing a very important role in the development of Chinatown as a neighborhood, and in particular, the portion of the Chinatown neighborhood that I know of as Chinatown North, and where there are, you know, some competing dynamics around, you know, sort of, I think the vision of who lives in that neighborhood, who can afford to live in the neighborhood, you know, and so another sort of very important thread of our work has been building relationships through the oral history projects that we've done with workers in the neighborhood. Some of the photos from those projects are on the slideshow that's sort of going behind me. In addition, we've done a number of other visual arts projects where we've commissioned artists to work with community members to create work in and also about the neighborhood, and to hopefully challenge residents as well as visitors to be able to see the neighborhood as more than just a place. It's a great place to eat and to shop, but also a place that's more than that, and it's a place where people work and where they live as well. And so hopefully through our presence, one of the other ways that we are contributing to and impacting social change will be actually around neighborhood change and neighborhood development as well.
So it's actually very interesting to me. I didn't really put together who I'd be sitting with, but everybody at this table has been part of the work that I've done since I've been starting doing Theater of Witness. Sharon has been extraordinary in helping to make connections with me in Poland, and also Alan, and in Ireland. So some of the international work that I've been doing completely came from the beginning of Swarthmore. One of the first Theater of Witness pieces that I did, Alston did the music with us, with people that were homeless. Gail was part of this festival where I was working with Vietnamese teens who had been really, really marginalized after there was a racially motivated killing in Southwest Philadelphia. And we did a piece with the teens called Between the Crack. And after that project, we did another one in the Cambodian community. And then Alan connected with me with all the people in Poland that I worked with for 2 years. So there's something extraordinary about this place, and truly about that word collaboration, which is really terrific. So the work that I've been doing was an outgrowth of my dance work, which is why I was originally here. And I think I felt like I wasn't a good enough choreographer. I didn't really know how to say anything that was really important dance-wise. But I had a real passion for listening to people's stories, especially people that we don't usually hear, stories that would be invisible. And I just decided to, at some point while I was teaching here in the dance program, that I wanted to do a piece about aging. And because I was here, and because I was on the faculty, I was able to easily get a grant, which was really wonderful. And I did a piece about aging with people in the community of Swarthmore who were in, that's embarrassing now, some of them were in their 60s, which I thought was old, which was like really embarrassing. But some were in their high 80s. That was the beginning of a complete change of life for me starting this work, which I call Theater of Witness, which is to work with people who haven't had really a voice in society, and with them being the performers, script a piece that they perform to really give voice and to help people bear witness to the true social issues that are happening. So I think what I'd like to show, and I'm actually going to completely mess you up, Dave. Okay. So if you can, instead of doing chapter 3, do chapter 2. Mm-hmm. In Chester, when John is working with the kids, I was working in the prison in Chester, which is actually quite a hard place to get into. Unfortunately, not so hard for the men that are living there, but hard to get into work in there. And I was invited to work with men serving life sentences. And there were 16 lifers there at the time. And the superintendent just said to me, the only thing I care about is that the title of this piece is called Living with Life. And I met with the men and deep interviews with each one. We did a lot of work collaboratively. We did a lot of laughing, a lot of deep crying, finding the collective stories and the personal stories. And we performed it in the prison. I think we did 10 performances, not only for population, but we brought in, this is the part that's the social change part. We were able to bring in victims. We were able to bring in families of the men, and even some ways more importantly, brought in judges. I think we had 12 members of the judiciary and legislators to really hear from these men. I'm just going to play you the opening clip. This was a song called Another Night that was written by one of the men named Schatz, and it just sort of gives you a flavor. It's just a tiny intro.
One second.
It should have the sound.
Another night, while I'm lying here alone, in my bed so cold, not as warm as yesterday.
Lions.
16 and a half years.
Career.
15 and a half years.
Guglielmo.
6,023 days. I'm still counting. 16 and a half years.
Attention all errors, attention all errors. We got 2,100 counts commencing, 2,100 counts commencing.
Boy.
I've been in prison since I was 17 years old. It was 26 years ago. I'm not the same man at age 44 than I was at age 17.
Violence.
When I first came to the penitentiary, they called me young buck. Now they call me old head. My number is older than half of the young guys here in the penitentiary. 23 years.
Joiner.
The 70s, the 80s, the 90s. I missed all of them. 31 years.
I thought about my children today and how they had to grow up without a father. Their special days, birthdays, little league games, proms, and first dates. And my mother and my father. How much I wanted to tell my mother I loved her before she passed away. But now my children are all grown up. Do they know me? And do I know them? And how will it end?
Smith.
I had 10,220 days in prison. I was 19 when I came. I'm 47 now.
Jones.
They tried to sentence me to death, but I was too young. So they waited until I turned 19 years old. The whole trial. 6.5 years on death row, 21 years in total.
How dear slip away from me.
If we can just change back the hands of time and do things differently than we did yesterday. It's amazing how a few minutes can change a life. How a few moments can change so many people's lives. The older you get, the more wise you become. You see your mistakes. How do I ask for forgiveness when because of me life was robbed? How do I make amends? When I think about the lives I affected, not just the victim's life, it's hard. It's very hard. It's like I want to live, they want to live. But I cannot change back the hands of time.
Attention all ears, attention all ears. We have a recount, we have a recount. Lights on, 2 officers, stand by your door. I did slip away.
I did slip away now.
I did slip away.
I did slip away now.
I did slip away.
And my mind started spinning.
I did slip away.
And my heart started winning.
I did slip
Oh, we
away.
leave it up to you, Lord.
I did slip
To
away.
break it up to you,
I
Lord.
did slip away. For me.
That was just the opening of that show. I want to say that for a long time, we have the film of it. We weren't allowed to show it on public television because of the Department of Corrections wouldn't let us do it. That was probably the last time that you could actually make a video of people in Pennsylvania. Most of these men were serving second-degree murder, which is mandatory life sentence in Pennsylvania. That meant that some of them were a lookout, and when they were 17 years old, on a robbery that turned into a homicide. They weren't even in the room. They have a mandatory life sentence. So because of that work, I got to know a lot of their family members, and then I got to know a lot of children of prisoners, and I continued to do work, many projects with children of prisoners, and then bringing victims and perpetrators together. And that continued to lead to work in Poland, where I got to work first with runaway girls who were living in an orphanage, and then also with prisoners in Warsaw. And then most recently to Ireland, where Northern Ireland, where I think they began to feel that maybe now was the time to tell some of these stories. And because I've been working with perpetrators and survivors together, they thought maybe we could bring people together. So the first project that I did was with people who had been in different paramilitary groups, the IRA and the UDA, and in the security forces, which is the RUC. And then people in the next generation. I got really interested in intergenerational work because the younger people are living with a legacy of what they call the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and they have paid the price of what mostly their fathers have done and what the mothers have tried to pick up the pieces for. It was a war that they didn't know much about. So we ended up creating this piece and touring it around the North and over the Republic, and then I made a second one with just women's voices. But I'm going to show you just a tiny clip, and this will be the Victoria one. Let me just give you a tiny background. Victoria is from a city of Omagh, which in 1990, oh God, I'm going to miss this. I think it was 1998. It was after the peace agreement. One of the biggest bombs happened in Omagh. And her father was in the RUC, which meant that he was in the security forces, so always she had to look under her car for bombs. She's grown up with so much anguish and no place to put it. And all of these things were not talked about. When she talks in this about Robin, she's talking about Robin, who's in the show, who was also a member of the RUC, and they got really, really close. I mean, this cross-generational work was just phenomenal. I just have to say one more thing. One of the men in this show, Finbar, a young man, his dad had been assassinated. He'd been a Sinn Féin counselor and was assassinated, and they knew that there had been RUC collusion. He could not even look at an RUC uniform. He couldn't sit in the room with Robin. And by the end of this program, Robin and he were just hugging each other, were joking with each other. I mean, there's been so much. Just seeing this group of people who shouldn't be in a room together was really extraordinary. But I just want to show you something where a small clip would give you a taste. So this is Victoria's part, and when she and you'll actually see her real father in it. Awesome. Can you just back it up so we hear her?
He hugs her like it might.
Just the entrance there and the...
Every time her daddy leaves, he hugs her like it might be the last time. Who are those bad men who want to hurt her daddy?
How does that feel? I know you're just reading it right now, but does that...
It feels honest, I suppose. When I was 4, my daddy took a picture of me wearing his RUC uniform. When he'd come home, we'd go straight upstairs, take it off and hang up his gun. My daddy always made me feel safe. Every time he'd leave the house, he'd hug me like it might be the last time. I was taught not to lie, but we weren't supposed to tell anyone that Daddy was in the police. Some things are too dangerous to say. Checking under the car for bombs was a daily activity. At night, in the dark, I'd get scared. Who were these bad men who wanted to hurt my daddy? I didn't necessarily know about that side of his life, that part of his life, and what it entailed. And so with Robin being still a serving officer, it allowed me to hear his perspective in a way I never had an opportunity to hear before. The day of the bomb, my father was out on duty, stationed 10 miles away from our home in Oma. I was meant to go into town, a short distance away from our house, to buy some stationery, but I was still at home with my mother, sister and aunt when the force of the blast shook the house. We kept waiting for Daddy as the death toll went from 8 to 13 to 20. The phone lines had been cut off and he had no way of reaching us. I've only recently found out that the police had heard over their radios that an officer's child was among the dead. Daddy lifted the blankets, looking for us on the makeshift morgue on the street. When we finally found Daddy, still on duty in the town centre, he'd later tell me that we were the most beautiful sight he'd ever seen. My father hasn't been the same since the bomb. After I finished school, I stayed at home an extra year so as not to leave him. I thought I might be the glue holding them together. He never talked about what he witnessed, and I didn't know how to bring it up. I didn't want to be responsible for bringing my daddy to tears. When I compare my own experiences to those of others, I feel as if I have no right to feel pain. No one in my family was killed. No one was physically injured. Compared to so many others in Oma and Northern Ireland and the rest of the world, I haven't suffered. I have no tragic story. But why do we feel the need to judge and compare our experiences? Why do we measure who has suffered the most? Not one of us who has lived through the violence here has been left unscathed. We all have our scars, seen and invisible. I was born in the middle of the Troubles. We've been carrying the secrets of those who came before us ever since we were born.
I think one of the things for me that was important about Victoria's story was she didn't think she had a story. And she was part of so many people, especially people in her generation, that felt like her story didn't count. And I guess I really believe that we all have stories, and we all have really important stories. And it's about listening, and that when we can come together and as a group, and especially as a diverse group, and listen to the stories that we might not have heard together, there's a chance for social change to begin. It's about having us hear with, I sometimes like to say, with the ears of our heart. And so it's not just ideas, but we're meeting real people, we're hearing real things, and there's a chance that then we can say, how can I help? How do I want to intersect this? What can I do? So I think I'll leave it at that.
I think I'd like to frame my question to the panel with just a couple bits of additional information about what I know Teya in particular has done over the years. To be aware that, for example, her work in Poland with these runaway girls did involve work with a Lang Scholar student Jen Cohen, who was supported by the Lang Center to go and be part of that entire process, which I was able to step in and out of at times to observe as well as help make the arrangements through the program we had for our students to study in Poland, and then also through Sharon's work and the college's work with off-campus study. We've been able to send students 4 semesters abroad, or even longer. I think some have gone for up to a year, right? To work with Teya doing this work in Northern Ireland. So this is work that has very direct tie-ins, sometimes very directly to the Lang projects we've been talking about all day, and in other ways just indirectly with the college. And the I guess the way I'd like to frame my question to the panel is also about this work that I observed and was able to help with in Poland, which is that one of the reasons I went to Poland always was because of the power of the theater and that's culture as an agent for social change. They would call it political. We're using social change as our euphemism, but it was as one of the most effective institutions for political intervention in society during a non-democratic rule. And so that was always what drew me there, and categories of arts as social change that really don't exist in the United States, because in a way they don't have to. It's different in a democratic society and a free market society than the society that they had. But when Teya came, for as sophisticated and advanced as that culture is in using the arts for social change, when Teya came with these projects, which were tiny, fragile little initiatives with these really fragile young women in this really halfway home, I guess we call it a juvenile detention center, I guess, but a very progressive juvenile detention center, kind of remarkable place in a really terrible environment, that it was, for people in the arts there, completely unprecedented. It was a completely new category of thinking about the arts in relationship to social issues. And then the work she did in Warsaw with these men who were also in prison for murder, and then one of the kind of confronted discoveries that Teya made in that situation was, oh, in this culture, there are no life sentences and there are no death sentences. So these men were a similar, maybe worse category of murderer than the people she was working with in Chester, but in that prison system and judicial system, it's a completely different philosophy about how you respond to those crimes. But she was working with people with that same history. But for the side of people concerned with social change as their primary mission, and for people in the arts and for people combined, these were completely new categories of practice that came from her in the United States to that environment. And so I guess then, kind of my question to the panel as a whole, because I think this is how the whole day for me is kind of, I think everybody probably in the room one way or another is thinking about this question, and I certainly am, is what is the gap, the essential gap filled by using the arts for social change as you understand it? Whether it's partnering with other types of initiatives for social change, other types of non-artistic institutions, other, on a human level, something that can't be reached any other way with certain populations, certain individuals. Why is this an essential piece in partnership or on its own in the larger question of social change or political change, if we want to drop the euphemism and say we're talking really about political change and political initiatives and political action? Where are the arts essential and not dependent or maybe decorative would be a charge maybe some people would bring to some of this work or work that claims to do this.
I guess the first thing that I just would want to say is, and I'm thinking of especially about Northern Ireland, that people are very used to a certain kind of discourse, and it's political discourse, and they know how to do that, and then they have discourse among themselves, and then they go to theater. But I think what they weren't used to was hearing the stories that were political, in a sense, not depoliticized, but humanized. And they kept saying, you're humanizing, we're putting a face and a name and a heart. And it gave people in the audience, they didn't just see the show, we always had talkbacks. And I can't say how many people said, this has completely transformed the way I see whatever the was. They were in a room with somebody that was their arch enemy. They were actually having empathy. And I feel like there's a different kind of discourse that can happen, that art can do, that takes it away from just facts and takes it away from opinions, but can open us up to what might be other possibilities.
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree that there's something about the arts. I mean, I think that probably for many of you, even just watching some of these video clips, where there's that human connection that happens as people are able to spend time with each other or to hear the stories of each other. And I can sort of draw that back even to sort of my own career as a campus activist at Swarthmore. You know, being very familiar with, you know, trying to circulate petitions and trying to, you know, organize protests. And then, you know, being able to actually see a performance that for me, you know, in my case, there was a particular performance, a solo performance by an Asian American theater artist that made me and the people in the room around me just moved in a different way. And so I became very energized around, you know, trying to raise funds at Swarthmore to be able to bring this performer and hopefully to be able to, you know, shift sort of the minds of the administration and of fellow students as to why Asian American studies might be important on this campus in a way that, you know, all of the petitions and all of the protests, you know, we're not going to be able to make that kind of difference. And I guess one other thing that I would, you know, sort of mention too from my own experience, I think, especially working with immigrant communities and with communities who are speakers of languages other than English. For me personally, since I grew up in Southern California and speak a little bit of Spanish, but I'm mostly monolingual, you know, that in terms of trying to build relationships with other people, even within the Asian American communities, the arts have been a way sometimes to be able to get around the language barriers that would otherwise exist.
I can add just a few things to that. For children, art is about the power of creation, about experiencing, making something, and knowing that he or she is the one who did it. It's like, Mommy, I drew this, and then she puts it up on the refrigerator, and that child just feels like $1 million. They are the star of the show for that absolute moment. Another thing that art offers children is self-criticism and the power of choice. You hand a child a piece of paper and some crayons, and they're making hundreds or even thousands of decisions. What do I want to draw? What color? What kind of mood am I in? Do I want to do what the teacher's telling me to do, or do I want to do something else because I can? And I think finally, maybe not most importantly, is humanity's urge to make beauty. Artists look at the world and they're mostly thinking, how can I make it better? And the trick is, again, transferring that impulse from the studio to the rest of the world. And that's what we're all trying to do in our work, is to take that impulse and say, if we can do it in the studio, then we can teach humanity how to do it. So, yeah.
I think the second question I'd like to ask is, because all activism and efforts for social change confront this one another, where have you each hit the biggest resistances? And maybe the resistances that you expected least when you went into a given project or a given situation, or just the work in general? Like what's the hardest force to confront?
And how do you get past it?
Yeah.
That's the fun part. Well, actually, I would say the first project I did in Poland was probably the hardest project that I did. First of all, I don't speak Polish, so that was huge. And I was working with two translators, one who was my words and one who was my ears. There was miscommunication with the group that was sponsoring me, and I was told I was working in a women's prison, and when I got there, it was really a school for girls that were very, very troubled. And there were days that I would go there, and one of the girls would be lying in bed with the covers up over her head, or she'd have her hood over her, you know, I'm sure John sees all this, with everything covered up, you know, the whole body covered up. And I thought, you know, they brought me over, I'm supposed to make this piece, how can I get these girls on stage? I can't put them on stage, they can't even get out of bed. They're not ready. And I usually am very careful about how I choose people, but you know, this was the group. But I think I keep trusting over and over, to just keep trusting the process, and to just, I realized I couldn't let them down. Like, they thought that they were gonna make a peace. They didn't know what it meant, but this woman came over, she promised them, and I couldn't leave without doing something. So I just decided to take the problem and make it the solution. Okay, what is, you know, right now it looks like these girls aren't ready. Maybe their stories could be told by young actresses. So I brought these young actresses in, and anyway, it turned out that spurred the girls to tell their own stories. And the young actresses were scared and learned, and they all did it together, which was actually even more powerful. But I think it's about just not giving up. And I think that that's something, I mean, anybody that is now, you know, Gail has this building now, and John has created an entire school. I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, these are people that don't give up. And I remember once, actually, it was at Swarthmore, there was somebody who came and talked about arts groups. And he said that he felt like all groups should learn from artists, because what artists do is that they don't give up. That they, like, no matter what, like, the show has to go on, and they'll figure it out. Everybody's ill, the theater burnt down, the show's gonna go on in the street. And I think that that's really important.
Oh, no, after you. One of our mantras in the school is that all children want three things. They want to be safe, they want to learn, and they want to be loved. And the other day I was in another school in Chester auditioning kids for the Chester Children's Chorus. I audition every second grader in Chester, so I actually get to, in the next 10 years I will have met every child in Chester in the second grade. They sing to me when I go down, oh, you're the doo-doo-doo-doo-doo guy. So they remember this thing. But not everybody understands this. And sometimes I'm in classes and the teachers are scolding the children even before something has happened. Now, I need to see your best behavior, because if not, you're going to miss this afternoon's party. So the first thing I say to the kids is, oh my gosh, you guys are going to have a party? So I'm thinking, why is this teacher yelling at these beautiful children? Because that's not the way the children want to respond. So the hard thing is convincing all of the adults that are involved in the children's lives that there is a better way to treat and raise and teach your children. That almost all children will respond to love. Now, love comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes, and you may have to hold someone down to get their attention. But what you are headed for is that you must find the kindness that is inside of each one of us, and that has got to be rooted in everything that we do. And I didn't know any of this vocabulary until I started working here at Swarthmore College. So all you folks out there to help me, Maurice and everyone else, I was just so dumb when I came. But it is so true. These those happy children. And the thing that kills me is that in the chorus is that I just can't see the kids enough. I can only see them 2 days a week, and then 6 weeks in the summer. The kids in the school are going to be fine. So I'll leave you with a happy story. We have one girl, an 8th grader, beautiful 8th grade girl in the Chester Children's Chorus. She just got a full ride to Episcopal Academy. Yeah. Right down the road. She is brilliant. She's a little jazz musician. I'm taking her and a couple of the guys out to go see a jazz show at the Painted Bride later on this evening. But that means that there are 119 other kids that haven't gotten that same scholarship. And I wish that I could create a program for all. There are only 7,000 children in Chester. It's not that hard. It really. I went to a high school in Brooklyn that has that many children. So it's possible. But it's just a shame that every child in the United States and in the whole world doesn't have everything that he or she needs, and that will continue to be the great sorrow for humanity, is that we don't take better care of our children.
I think I'll share, I guess, a couple of things, but definitely I think it's in the work that I've had the chance to do with young people in our communities. I think similar to what you're saying, I think the hardest thing has been when I realized that there is just a larger social context that they and we, through our combined work, are not always able to change. And especially for the young people who go through our programs and have so much, potential, and who see different options that they would like to be able to choose in their lives, but then who ultimately feel like their best choice is to join the military, which has happened to a number of the youth in our programs. and definitely it's been very difficult to find ways to support them and also to listen to the stories of what they have had to witness or do after they come back from Afghanistan or Iraq. I think, I don't know exactly, sort of what we do to get through it except to, just be there for those youth, and to provide them with like sort of the listening support that they sometimes need to be able to try to recover from those experiences. And then, on the other hand, I think that some of the greatest joys is, working with the youth who are realizing, that they do have other choices, or and being able to, sort of put them in touch with like other options and to support them, as they're finding ways to go to community college, as they're finding ways to, sort of work in other positions, and even as they're making choices to move away from home or Philadelphia and from us, I think is really exciting. One other thing that I'll also quickly mention that I think has also been a challenge, since I am not actually, I'm probably the only person on this panel who's not doesn't call myself a working artist, that took me a long time actually to get comfortable with the fact that that I was not going to not going to in most contexts identify as an artist. But in general, since Asian Arts Initiative's work depends so much, on the ability and the commitment of artists as, creators and also as facilitators of this kind of work. I think it takes a very unique kind of person and a kind of artist to do the kind of work that we're describing today. And so one of the things that Asian arts, and especially, within the Asian American community, and then in in Philadelphia, and then, sort of with this kind of commitment to doing, community-based work, for us, one of the successes that we had was actually starting a program that we called our Artists and Communities Training Program, but really to be able to identify emerging artists who wanted to develop the skills to do community-based projects and to learn how to do some of the kinds of basic things like lesson planning and group management techniques, and also identifying sort of their own passions and push-button issues to be able to be ready to work with diverse communities of folks. And so, yeah, I mean, I say that I think continues to be a challenge and something that, I hope that, through our work, but also through many of our other work, we can find and cultivate that next generation of artists to continue to go on as well.
So I think we can open it up to questions from the group if anyone would like to pose one to anyone of our our speakers today.
Teya, what are you working on now?
Working and getting healthy. I'm hoping that in Northern Ireland they're actually reapplying for a Peace 3 grant to do another project. We had a dream. I have a really big dream, which we don't have the funding for, so I'm put the dream out there. Because everybody, when we were performing our last show, everybody was saying, what's next? And when I put this idea, Derry or Londonderry, which is where I was based, which is where Bloody Sunday happened, just got chosen to be the City of Culture for the UK in 2013. So the UK. So we have this idea of bringing a group of about 6 or 8 women from countries of war together in residence in Derry to live together in community for about 6 months and to create a theater of witness piece about women and war and peace that would be performed in Derry and then go back to hopefully Rwanda and Bosnia and bring to the States. So we're all really excited about it. One of the reasons I'm really excited about it is it takes theater of witness bigger. It will mean a lot of people have to help work together to create a community for these women. So that's what I'm hoping to be working on.
My question is for Gail, and it's in reference to the incident that happened in the public school system between the African American students and the Asian students. And I wanted to know what kinds of outcomes resulted from that. Was there any intervention on the part of Asian Arts, or I'm just wondering what was the follow-up?
Yeah. Let's see. In some ways, I feel like I'm not the best qualified person probably to be responding, but I can share some of what I know or have been part of. I mean, there was definitely a tremendous amount, actually, of leadership among a lot of the students from all different racial backgrounds, and from adult community organizers backing them. There were about 70 students who staged a boycott of the schools for a week-long period, and the students who didn't attend school during that time instead gathered to actually study and make recommendations to the school district itself. And in general, I think the students have been very smart and careful to try to frame the incident as more than just a racial incident. I think there was a lot of people within the specific school administration at the time and also in the school district who, have tried to sort of play it off as like, oh, well, that's just the racial tensions. When in fact that it actually has a lot to do with the sort of the oversights of the adults within the school administration itself. And there have been significant changes and victories specifically within South Philadelphia High School. The principal who was present in 2009, she was, I think, the 4th principal in a period of a very short period of years. But she resigned last spring, and the current principal, Otis Hackney, is someone who, many students and many community organizations have come to trust and respect. He's someone who's been very good about reaching out and listening and making small policy changes in ways that can make a big difference. Even to, like, as one example, allowing students to be able to report incidences of harassment in their own language, as opposed to having to fill out the form in English. And so, so things like that. And then there's also been, Asian Arts Initiative is fortunate, to be able to access some of the additional resources that have now been made available at the school to be able to run after-school programming for students. And there's a number, of other organizations that are focused now on trying to be resources, for those specific students. At the same time, the school was just, named as one of the 18 Renaissance schools that's going to be sort of undergoing transition, and is being targeted for sort of its low academic performance. So there's again still sort of questions about sort of the fate of the school itself, and then questions also about how kind of broader than at the specific school, how can there be sort of a policy and cultural shift kind of district-wide. I don't know if that addresses some of your question. Yeah, it does.
Is it a safer place? Well, when you're there.
It's hard to say. The school was built, I think, for probably about 3 times the number of students as currently populated. There's about a 900, student enrollment has decreased to about 900. And so it's actually a very desolate place. Even, for me as an adult, I know I'm a short Asian woman, but I also have some self-defense training, so I'm not easily intimidated. But
no, you're not.
But it is still a pretty bleak kind of environment to walk into, especially after school when the halls like empty out, and it can feel like a pretty scary place.
Jen? A question for Teya. So I was thinking about the prison scene sequence that you showed us. Have you been able to give that a wider audience, and if so, what?
I actually usually show quite a few clips everywhere I go, and I always there's certain ones that I always show, and people always respond, and especially interesting showing it abroad. I then did another project at Graterford, which with maximum security prison, and unfortunately they weren't allowed, the prisoners weren't allowed to be in the video, so I had former prisoners playing their parts. But we haven't been able to air it, that it's not allowed to be aired at least in Pennsylvania.
And is that because of the individual identities or
Because
it's so
if a victim saw the face of somebody that had been the perpetrator in the crime, the problem is that there's no such thing really as restorative justice here. I mean, there's so many potential of good things to come from this, especially when we heard victims in the audience who said, you know, my brother was murdered, and today, for the first time, I feel like I have empathy and I want to reach out. I mean, so I know things could come from this. The one thing is actually there's a woman from Temple University, Kay Harris, who was head of criminal justice, and she's been bringing students into Chester, and the men were still at Chester, and this was done in 2002 was the video. They're still running workshops with the students, which is really great, because they're so articulate and incredible. But it's also been very, very sad what's happened. I mean, they're still there. Although one of them just got his sentence commuted, although he's still a dare, got commuted in January. But that's huge, because that's the first commutation since 2002. Yeah, I know I think with all of this work, the people who we don't usually get to hear from become the teachers. And they have so much to teach about everything, and about deprivation, and about loneliness, and about forgiveness, and about remorse, and about family. And I did bring students in when I was teaching here. I forgot that. I brought a group of students in, which was extraordinary. Yeah.
I was thinking about them writing their songs and harmonizing and creating art in the midst of all their pain. It's really, you gave them more hope, even if there wasn't hope for freedom, than they must have known.
I think it was remarkable. In every performance, they would get mobbed. People were hugging them and sobbing and sobbing. And you know, that was just, there were a lot of songs and there were a lot of things that were, but I think it's also been hard because I think it did open up hope. And I still think hope is really important. And I think they all think this was the most important thing that they did in their lives.
Who did they perform it for?
They performed, some of it was for population, so some performances were just for other people in the population. Then we had public performances, and we specifically invited victims groups, legislators, judges, and families of the men. One of the family members, I remember, he stood up and he said, "That's my dad up there, and I never knew what you did. And today I promise you I won't follow in your footsteps." I mean, it was just so much heartbreak, but so much beauty.
John, can you say something about how you were able to start your school?
It was convoluted, the process. We originally tried a private school, but didn't think that we could sustain it year after year. And then 3 years ago, at that time, we approached the district and wanted to do a public-private partnership, but the then Board of Control was very much supportive of charters. So we tried a charter, and then that Board of Control was ousted, and then another one was put in. And so we went back to a private school model, and just as we were negotiating with the school district, a new superintendent came in and asked us to be a partner. And so we it's about $3,000 per child, so it's about $1 million project for the school, and about half that for the chorus. All of the teachers are union members, but it's where you should come have a look. It's a pretty beautiful place now.
Maybe one last question.
My question just has to do with just art and social change as a broad issue, and I just wanted to know how any of you encountered art itself being used not in a progressive manner, but in something that would be antagonistic to your project. We always associate art and social change with progressive.
I have a quick answer. A lot of the music that my children listen to is not healthy in any way. It's misogynistic. It's unimaginative. It lacks harmony. It is not the great R&B songs from the 60s and 70s. When we did a 60s and 70s set, we did the Supremes and the Temptations. All the kids lit up. They did Beatles. In fact, they knew nothing about the Beatles. They said, John, I love your song, Let It Be. No, I didn't write that. No. I wish I had. We'd have 10 schools. But it is tough. So what I do is, is that I take their grooves and I take their hooks and you just respin it. Now the other side of the coin is that the dance that my Chester children can do. I mean, they're some of the best little dancers in the world. But the music. I mean, African American music. I mean, the contribution to America. We would have no quintessentially American music without the African American contribution. And for every extraordinary singer, there are 10 that are making it more difficult for us to do our jobs, and that's the truth.
So I think we've already gone over, thanks to the generous schedule that we've gotten from the beginning, but we're actually over the original scheduled time. So I think we can continue the conversation in the reception if you all would like to join us there, and it'll be in the lobby.
And help us thank the panelists for their time.